Every grocery aisle hides a gamble, but few products are as quietly dangerous as the sausage that so many families rely on. Year after year, federal regulators log millions of pounds of meat pulled from shelves, not for taste or freshness, but because of contamination with sharp metal shards, toxic bacteria, and even undeclared allergens that can send vulnerable people straight to the hospital. The USDA has recorded well over 100 Class 1 meat recalls in the last decade alone, each one labeled a reasonable probability of causing serious illness or death. For older Americans living on fixed incomes, this reality feels like a cruel trap, choosing between affordable food that may poison them slowly and pricier alternatives their budgets can't sustain. And behind the colorful packaging, these sausages often carry staggering sodium loads and chemical residues linked to long-term diseases. It raises the question, how did a food once marketed as a symbol of comfort and Americana turn into a silent threat sitting in our freezers? This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. Today we pull back the curtain on the sausage industry, exposing the risks and revealing which brands still offer safe alternatives. Number 1. Hilshire. Just yesterday, Americans were jolted awake with breaking headlines that nearly 58 million pounds of Hilshire sausage and corn dog products were slapped with a nationwide Class 1 recall, the USDA's harshest warning reserved for foods that can cause serious harm or death. This wasn't some small-town grocery mishap. These tainted products had already wormed their way into school cafeterias, military bases, and family freezers across the country. Investigators found wooden stick shards baked right into the batter at a Texas plant, and at least 5 people have already been injured from biting down on splinters disguised as supper. Imagine serving your grandkids what you thought was a warm, all-American corn dog, only to realize the prize inside isn't meat, but a jagged piece of wood sharp enough to shred gums. For older Americans who've weathered decades of recalls and broken promises, this isn't just unsettling news. It's proof that the system meant to guard your plate is asleep at the wheel. And if you think this is a one-off disaster, think again. Hilshire's history is littered with recalls for foreign objects, metal bits, rubber fragments, even bone pieces masquerading as breakfast. Every time, the company issues a polished apology and expects families to keep chewing as though nothing happened. Behind the bright Jimmy Dean commercials and cheerful State Fair packaging lies a conveyor belt of negligence where speed and profit trump safety. Tyson Foods, Hilshire's corporate master, has long worn the crown of scandal. Fines for environmental pollution, lawsuits over unsafe pandemic-era practices, and worker injuries that read like war stories. OSHA reports have tallied severed fingers, crushed arms, and lives permanently scarred. A grotesque irony when you realize that every safe sausage patty on the shelf is stamped out at a human cost. The truth is, the sizzling sound in your frying pan might echo with more than grease. It may carry the unspoken cries of exhausted workers pushed past their limits. But the rot doesn't stop at the factory floor. Hilshire's pork supply chain runs through industrial farms where pigs are jammed into cages so tight they can't even turn around. Waterways choke on runoff toxic enough to kill fish by the thousands. And nearby communities endure a stench so pungent it seeps through walls. For retirees and low-income families living near these operations, the smell of breakfast isn't nostalgia. It's corporate contempt, served daily, and then comes the salt and fat bomb. One serving of Jimmy Dean sausage can load you with nearly a quarter of your daily sodium allowance and enough saturated fat to make your blood pressure spike faster than a racetrack speedometer. It's like wrapping a grenade in a biscuit and daring you to take a bite. Marketing spins it as hearty energy. But for seniors already battling hypertension, it's closer to a booby trap hiding in plain sight. Even Washington isn't immune to Hilshire's greasy fingerprints. Tyson has spent millions lobbying lawmakers to weaken safety rules and speed up processing lines. That push for more sausages per minute is what opens the door to wooden splinters in corn dogs and forces the USDA into damage control. The betrayal is doubled when you remember that these same products are funneled into school lunches and government contracts. The very meals supposed to nourish the nation's most vulnerable. And don't forget the lawsuits over price fixing. While seniors stretch every Social Security check to cover groceries, these companies were accused of colluding to jack up pork prices, essentially making families pay extra for the privilege of risking their health. So when Hilshire tries to paint itself as a smiling neighbor serving biscuits with a side of Americana, what you're really getting is a grinning hustler peddling poisoned nostalgia. Each sausage link is less a comfort food and more a loaded gamble that corporations expect you to lose. And for those wondering if they're stuck choosing between toxic sausages or going hungry, it doesn't have to be that way. Brands like Applegate Naturals, Adel's, and Teton Waters Ranch offer cleaner, stricter alternatives. Meats raised with fewer shortcuts and less corruption baked into the process. They may not come with glossy commercials of cowboy breakfasts, but at least they don't serve you a splinter with your side of eggs. Number 2. Johnsonville. Back in April 2025, Johnsonville was forced into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons when federal regulators announced a Class 1 recall on more than 22,000 pounds of its cheddar bratwursts after sharp plastic shards were discovered in the meat. The recall covered 10 states and even came with a government-issued product code and establishment number so shoppers could scramble to check their freezers. 2 consumer complaints were enough to trigger the action, but the USDA made clear that the risk was considered serious, even life-threatening. Imagine putting what you thought was a hearty brat on the dinner plate, only to find yourself chewing on hard plastic like a bad magic trick gone wrong. For older Americans who stretch every grocery dollar, the thought of tossing out bags of sausage is another gut punch in a season of inflation and broken promises. And the unsettling part? This wasn't Johnsonville's first stumble. Just 1 year earlier, more than 35,000 pounds of turkey kielbasa were yanked from shelves over rubber contamination. Dig deeper and you'll find other embarrassing incidents, from glove fragments to foreign material that somehow snuck past quality checks. Each time the company apologizes and moves on, but consumers are left wondering why a brand that calls itself the pride of Wisconsin keeps producing products that sound more like hazards than heritage. It's as if Johnsonville's slogan should be rewritten. You bring the grill, we'll bring the recalls. The nutrition facts only pile insult on top of injury. A single brat can pack over 700 milligrams of sodium and more than 20 grams of fat, numbers that hit the bloodstream of retirees already juggling pills for cholesterol and blood pressure. The smiling commercials of backyard cookouts don't mention that one too many brats could send you to the ER faster than wet cement clogs a drain pipe. For a generation raised on the myth of hearty Midwestern meals, it feels like betrayal wrapped in a sausage casing. Behind the product is a supply chain steeped in cruelty. Pigs are packed into pens where movement is nearly impossible, breathing in air so thick with ammonia it burns the lungs. Factory barns tied to suppliers have been accused of dumping nitrate-heavy waste into waterways, leaving rural families, many of them retirees, facing contaminated wells. So while Johnsonville's ads wave the American flag, real Americans are left drinking toxic water in their own kitchens. It's like the bratwurst is laughing at you while poisoning your backyard. Corporate behavior hasn't helped their reputation. Johnsonville has been dragged into lawsuits alleging deceptive marketing, including accusations of padding sausages with fillers while charging premium prices. In mid-2025, even Hormel Foods sued, alleging that trade secrets and recipes had been lifted by former employees now working at Johnsonville. Whether proven or not, the very suggestion paints the brand less as a family-friendly company and more as a backroom operator playing dirty in the sausage wars. Meanwhile, stories of migrant workers toiling and punishing shifts at processing plants, often in unsanitary conditions, make every bratwurst link taste like exploitation. Add to that reports of Johnsonville aligning with lobbying groups, fighting stricter labeling, and food safety regulations, and you have a picture of a brand that grins in its commercials while working behind the curtain to keep you ignorant of what's actually on your plate. At the end of the day, Johnsonville isn't the smiling neighbor flipping brats on the grill. It's the slick salesman who leaves you with a chipped tooth, spiking blood pressure, and polluted water. Every snap of a Johnsonville brat is less about tradition and more about corporate betrayal. And for those who want something safer on the grill, consider Belinsky's with organic chicken sausages free of antibiotics, Neiman Ranch with humanely raised pork, or Field Roast for a plant-based option that avoids the factory farm baggage altogether. They may not have jingles as catchy, but at least they won't serve you plastic shards with your supper. Number 3. Oscar Mayer. On July 2nd, 2025, the USDA dropped a bombshell. Kraft Heinz was pulling back more than 367,000 pounds of Oscar Mayer turkey bacon after federal tests flagged the possibility of listeria contamination. This wasn't some niche product in a dusty corner store. These vacuum-packed slabs of family breakfast had already shipped nationwide and even overseas, landing in freezers from small-town America to Hong Kong. The recall was classified as Class 1. the USDA's highest danger warning, the same level used when death is a reasonable possibility. Pregnant women, seniors, kids, and those with weakened immune systems were urged to toss every suspect package and call their doctor at the first sign of fever or stomach pain. For older Americans who've trusted Oscar Mayer jingles since childhood, the news felt like an ambush. What was sold as morning joy turned into a roulette wheel for your health. And here's the bitter twist. No illnesses had yet been confirmed, but that doesn't erase the menace of listeria. This pathogen has a notorious reputation. It thrives in cold storage, lurks in ready-to-eat meats, and has historically sent thousands to hospitals. That's why the media picked up the story so quickly. Turkey bacon, a product pitched as the lighter alternative, could just as easily land someone in intensive care. The real tragedy is how routine this feels. Oscar Mayer has been here before, yanked into recalls for everything from metal shards to glass fragments hiding in hot dogs. Each case is a reminder that what's marketed as nostalgic Americana can just as easily morph into a booby trap hiding inside your fridge. But food safety is just the tip of the iceberg. Kraft Heinz, the corporate puppeteer behind Oscar Mayer, has stumbled through financial scandals that read like a Wall Street cautionary tale. Billions written off in goodwill, probes into accounting misstatements, and a $62 million settlement with the SEC over procurement fraud. These aren't just abstract numbers on a balance sheet. They signal a culture where cutting corners is normal, where shareholders are duped, and where consumers can't be sure if the sausages are being managed with more care than the company's books. If executives are willing to blur financial reality, what faith should shoppers have in their promises about food safety? Meanwhile, nutrition is a crisis hiding in plain sight. A single Oscar Mayer hot dog can deliver nearly 600 milligrams of sodium and a fat load hefty enough to send any cardiologist reaching for the prescription pad. Add in nitrates and nitrites, chemicals classified as Group 1 carcinogens by the World Health Organization, and you're not biting into summer fun. You're chewing on the same category of risk as cigarettes and asbestos. For seniors who grew up singing the jingle, the betrayal stings like finding out the family doctor was slipping poison into the prescription bottle all along. Pull back the curtain further and the cruelty only multiplies. Suppliers tied to Kraft Heinz have been accused of confining hogs in coffin-like cages, while human workers face low pay, dangerous conditions, and relentless pressure to crank up production. That silly Wintermobile that rolls across parades. It's less a mascot and more a moving distraction. A giant hot dog on wheels diverting attention from the sweat, suffering, and scandals that trail behind the brand like grease stains on a highway. Even politics plays into the deception. Kraft Heinz has poured money into lobbying to fight stricter food labeling, sodium disclosures, and safety regulations. In other words, they spend millions making sure you don't know what's inside the package. For retirees trying to protect their health on shrinking budgets, it's like being asked to walk blindfolded across a minefield, with Oscar Mayer cheerleaders singing in the background. At its rotten core, Oscar Mayer isn't the smiling neighbor handing out hot dogs at a block party. It's the smooth-talking con artist in a mascot costume, selling nostalgia while stuffing carcinogens, sodium bombs, and corporate deceit into casings. Every bite isn't a taste of childhood joy, but a reminder that the brands you trusted most may be the very ones laughing as your health crumbles. And if you're ready to break the spell, better choices exist. Dystal Turkey Ranch offers antibiotic-free turkey franks. True Story Foods serves up sausages from humanely raised animals with transparent sourcing. And Lightlife provides plant-based hot dogs with fewer additives and clearer labeling. They may not come with jingles, but at least they won't sell you a smile with a side of listeria. Number 4. Cadmium. On July 17, 2025, Cadmium Foods found itself thrown straight into the national spotlight when federal regulators announced a Class 1 recall covering more than 24,000 pounds of its all-natural al fresco chicken sausage sweet apple with Vermont-made syrup. 3 consumer complaints had already surfaced about hard white plastic hiding in the links, and the USDA made clear that products shipped nationwide, including Walmart distribution centers, were at risk. Packages bore the establishment code P7839 and a use-by date of October 1st, 2025, sending households scrambling to check freezers. For older Americans trying to stretch every nickel, the idea of tossing out groceries bought with Social Security dollars was more than an inconvenience. It was a gut punch, a reminder that even so-called all-natural labels can hide dangers sharp enough to choke you. And here's the unsettling truth. Cayem's record isn't spotless. In the past, thousands of pounds of sausages were pulled after misbranding incidents, including undeclared pork casings and chicken products that left consumers exposed to allergen risks. Years earlier, federal regulators even slapped the company with enforcement actions tied to its ammonia refrigeration systems, accusing Cayem of violating the Clean Air Act. To many consumers, those legal filings and civil penalties translate into a single question. If a company can't keep its own machinery and labels in line, why should anyone trust what ends up on their dinner plate? The July recall didn't appear out of thin air. It followed a long pattern of operational lapses that make the Fenway Frank slogan feel more like a cruel joke than a hometown badge of honor. Nutritionally, the betrayal only deepens. A single Cayem Fenway Frank carries around 550 milligrams of sodium and a thick dose of saturated fat. Numbers that pile up in silence, slowly clogging arteries like bubblegum jammed into subway turnstiles. For retirees balancing blood pressure pills and Medicare copays, this isn't a snack, it's sabotage sold with a smile. Marketing might dress it up as a family tradition tied to baseball and summer afternoons, but what's really sizzling is a health hazard in a bun. It's like singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" while your body quietly calls for a defibrillator. The labor stories are just as bitter. Whistleblowers and investigative reports have accused Cayem of leaning on immigrant labor, pushing workers into long hours under punishing conditions with low pay. Machinery was said to be unsafe, sanitation inadequate, and complaints silenced. Every bite of a Fenway Frank starts to taste less like nostalgia and more like the sweat of exploited workers who never saw a fair paycheck. For older Americans who still believe in the dignity of honest labor, that truth stings. The very sausage sold as a symbol of tradition is forged in shadows of exploitation. And let's not forget the supply chain. Environmental groups have tied Cayem's meat sourcing to factory farms polluting waterways across New England. Nitrate-heavy runoff has poisoned small-town wells, leaving rural families, many of them retirees, with toxic water flowing from their taps. Imagine boiling your morning coffee with water laced with the hidden cost of cheap sausages. That's not baseball pride, that's corporate contempt in liquid form. Even branding has turned ironic. Cayem leans on its deal with the Boston Red Sox, parading its Fenway Frank as the official hot dog. Yet consumer complaints and past recalls reveal shortcuts in processing and labeling. For anyone who believed they were buying into a proud local tradition, the discovery that the package may contain undisclosed allergens or foreign objects feels less like patriotism and more like a bait and switch. It's the culinary equivalent of paying for box seats and ending up in the nosebleeds with a blocked view. At its heart, Cayem isn't the proud hometown hero it pretends to be. It's the fast-talking announcer covering up a losing score with a cheerful voice. They sell you sausages wrapped in Americana, but underneath is a greasy mix of recalls, contamination, labor abuse, and environmental harm. The Fenway Frank isn't a tradition, it's a trick. A sleight of hand that leaves you with clogged arteries, poisoned trust, and an emptier wallet. And if that feels like too high a price for nostalgia, there are better choices waiting in the dugout. Peterson's Natural Farms with uncured, no-sugar pork sausages, Amaloo with cleaner chicken recipes, and Beyond Meat with plant-based sausages that put transparency ahead of trickery. Number 5. Impossible. In mid-November 2024, Impossible Foods was forced to recall nearly 79,000 chubs of its so-called savory and spicy ground sausage after production checks flagged metal fragments hiding inside the plant-based patties. The FDA stamped it a Class 2 recall, not the deadliest category, but still a warning that swallowing one of those fragments could shred mouths and throats like a razor in disguise. The specific UPCs and use-by dates were published so households could raid their freezers and pitch anything suspect. But for older Americans who've been sold on the promise of a safe, sustainable future, this was more than a product notice. It was a brutal wake-up call that even the darling of Silicon Valley can leave you chewing steel. And the ugly part? This isn't their first stumble. A few years earlier, a co-manufacturer recall tied Impossible nuggets to pieces of wood. Critics have also flagged the company's infamous soy like hemoglobin, the engineered heme, designed to make fake meat bleed. The FDA itself raised questions about whether it was safe for long-term consumption, but Impossible pushed it through with lobbying that would make Big Tobacco blush. For retirees who remember, asbestos sold as miracle insulation, the déjà vu is chilling. The miracle ingredient feels less like innovation and more like a biotech gamble with consumers cast as guinea pigs. Independent tests haven't been kind either. Some reports found heavy metals like cadmium and lead in impossible products, traced back to contaminated soils where the soy and pea proteins are grown. The numbers may sound tiny on paper, measured in micrograms, but like rust creeping silently through old pipes, they accumulate in bones and organs for decades. For seniors already battling fragile health, it's less a modern solution and more a slow-motion betrayal. Green marketing wrapped around a toxic center. Even the nutrition panel hides a landmine. A single Impossible sausage packs over 500 milligrams of sodium, nearly neck and neck with the greasy brats it claims to replace. Marketing tells you it's better for you, but the truth is it can spike blood pressure just as fast, leaving older consumers to pay premium prices for the same cardiovascular punishment. It's like swapping Marlboros for herbal smokes and convincing yourself the smoke isn't filling your lungs. The comedy is cruel because the punchline lands in arteries, not on stage. And then there's the hypocrisy of the eco-halo. Impossible touts itself as the knight in shining armor against factory farming, but investigative reports show its production depends on industrial suppliers tied to the same pollution and animal welfare scandals as big meat. The wolf didn't leave the barn, it just pulled on a pea protein fleece. For retirees who buy into the idea they're protecting grandchildren's futures with each purchase, realizing they've been duped feels like watching the recycling bin get emptied straight into the landfill. The politics behind it all only deepen the mistrust. Impossible has spent millions lobbying for approvals, fighting labeling rules that would force it to admit just how heavily engineered its ingredients are. They claim transparency while greasing palms in Washington. For older Americans raised to believe honesty was a virtue, it's betrayal wearing a lab coat and a Silicon Valley grin. Even the consumer experience has cracks. Many buyers report digestive issues, bloating, indigestion, gas, brushed off by the company as normal adjustment to plant protein. For seniors with fragile digestion, that's not adjustment, it's agony disguised as progress. You're not buying a miracle sausage, you're buying stomach pain at a premium. At its core, Impossible didn't just fail on safety, it hijacked values like health, ethics, and sustainability, and flipped them into a profit machine. The Impossible sausage isn't the future, it's a mirage, a lab-engineered gamble dressed up as salvation. And for those unwilling to bankroll another corporate con, better options exist. Sweet Earth with organic, cleaner plant sourcing. Upton's Naturals. With minimally processed seitan sausages, and First Field Sausage Kefir, a small regional pork producer with transparent small batch farming. They may not come with billion-dollar marketing campaigns, but at least they won't sell you a splinter of steel wrapped in soy. Number 6. Nathan's. Nathan's Famous has long been dressed up as the crown jewel of Americana, the hot dog you see waved around every 4th of July, like it's as sacred as fireworks and baseball. But in May 2017, the bun slipped and the truth came spilling out. John Morrell and Koser, the Smithfield division behind Nathan's, yanked over 210,000 pounds of hot dogs off shelves nationwide after consumers reported metal fragments hiding inside the franks. Imagine the horror of boiling a pack of Nathan's in a tiny kitchen, only to realize the meal on your plate could double as a dental drill. That isn't tradition. That's treachery with a side of mustard. Regulators were blunt. More than 100 tons of product were recalled, stamped with establishment code EST296. And the USDA warned that those shards could cause choking, oral injuries, or worse. Even though no injuries were officially confirmed, the sheer scope forced households coast to coast to toss out groceries they could barely afford to waste. For seniors already counting pennies from a Social Security check, the thought of paying for food that could land them in the hospital feels like insult stacked on injury. But this wasn't an isolated oops. John Morrell's track record reads like a charge sheet. Listeria scares, allergen mislabeling, and a legacy of environmental crimes stretching back decades. The company has paid fines and signed consent decrees over wastewater discharges and Clean Water Act violations. Each violation is another nail in the coffin of trust, proof that the culture inside these plants is one of cutting corners until regulators catch them red-handed, and Smithfield, Nathan's parent company, only adds to the unease. Owned by WH Group, a Chinese conglomerate, the brand many retirees associate with Coney Island nostalgia is now entangled in global profit pipelines. For those who remember Cold War anxieties, the idea that an American icon is bankrolling foreign boardrooms. Tastes more bitter than relish, gone rancid. Beyond ownership, the supply chain is soaked in scandal. Factory farms tied to Smithfield have been accused of animal cruelty and environmental devastation. Pigs crammed in crates, waste lagoons leaking toxins into small-town groundwater, rural families choking on ammonia in the air. Add to that reports of immigrant laborers forced into exhausting shifts under dangerous conditions, and every Nathan's Frank starts to taste less like a ballpark memory and more like exploitation stuffed into a casing. And then comes the silent killer: nutrition. A single Nathan's Frank carries more than 500 milligrams of sodium and hefty grams of fat. A salt grenade waiting to explode in the arteries of retirees juggling hypertension. The annual hot dog contest may be billed as spectacle, but for seniors watching at home, it's a parade of health risks dressed as entertainment. Nathan sells a nostalgia, but what it delivers is a cocktail of recalls, foreign ownership, pollution, labor abuse, and heart-clogging nutrition. For older Americans who once saw a Nathan's Frank as a summer treat, the betrayal feels personal, like realizing the fireworks lighting up the sky are just smoke from a burning landfill. Nathan's isn't the friendly neighbor inviting you to a cookout. It's the con artist draped in a flag, serving you danger disguised as tradition. And for those done with the deception, there are safer, cleaner choices like Welshire Farms with natural beef franks free of nitrates, Fork in the Road with humanely raised sausages, and Urban Organic, a regional producer offering small batch hot dogs without industrial baggage. Every bite hides a story of betrayal. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and subscribe now to uncover the truths they bury.
Thank you for watching today's video all the way through. If you found the content helpful, don't forget to click like and subscribe to stay updated to our latest daily videos. Now feel free to check out other feature videos currently shown on your screen. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.